Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Watson Michael from Ceylon Institute of English and Leadership. And today we have a very interesting guest with us, all the way from the US, Mr. Quinton Krueger, who is the founder and board director of Probility AI. And Probility AI has been featured in an article by the Harvard Business Review. Quinton, welcome. How are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on the show here. I'm looking forward to having an amazing discussion this evening about AI, sports, and we'll see where it takes us.
Absolutely. It's such an honor to have you. And Quinton, could you give us a brief background about yourself?
Sure. My name's Quinton Krueger. Again, I'm currently the founder of Probility AI, which is one of the first AI, I'll say, enabled companies that is bringing predictive analytics to professional sports around the world. My background, classically trained engineer in chemical engineering, multiple master's degrees from Michigan Tech University, University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School, and most recently I had finished my executive MBA a few years back at Kellogg, which is part of the Northwestern University. And
Great.
I can tell you a little bit professionally beyond education background, because I'm a very big believer in practical knowledge. I spent about 15 years in Washington, D.C., where I worked active ops in the Pentagon, in the E-Ring, as well as for the Department of Homeland Security, where I oversaw all of the homemade explosives and transportation challenges across, I'll say, all 452 U.S. airports, as well as working with many of our international partner countries. So if you've ever been to an airport and you've had the pleasure of keeping your shoes on or your belts on, that's a little bit of the work that I used to do in my previous life before launching full into being an AI entrepreneur.
Wow. Well, no, that's a pretty impressive background. Okay, right. Okay. So yeah. So Toby, there'll be some jobs like coming within a decade or two, which we have never heard of. So so that will. So what are your views on AI? Because it's, I would say, it's disruptive innovation, and we can see so many things going on these days.
Yeah, I think a good primer for the audience here is to really get a good grasp of, what is AI when we're talking about it? Everybody's hearing it right now because of things like ChatGPT, which is great. Is like mine because there's awareness. One of the big things I would like, the audience to understand about AI and kind of our views on it is before, like 5 years ago, it was very expensive to obtain. You'd have to go to like a high-end consulting firm like a McKinsey or Booz Allen, Boston Consulting Group, and you would pay over $1 million to have a data team come in and start asking you all these questions, and it was not democratized. So kind of one of our goals at Probility was, how do you take the technology that's been developed by these big consulting firms, and how could you democratize it, and where could you do it? And one of those areas just happened to be, pro sports. But we've also looked at it in manufacturing, retail, and people are going to start seeing it everywhere. In fact, within the next 5 years, not only are you going to start seeing these new job titles about chief data engineer, chief digital officer, chief data scientists that are becoming very, very popular. But if you do something as simple as go grocery shopping or even do an ATM transaction, things are going to be powered by AI-enabled bots, and you're going to expect certain degrees of service that only AI can provide, and those people that can't are going to be out of business.
Yeah. Wow. Pretty interesting. Okay. Yeah. So what do you see between let's say, the difference between AI and ML, machine learning?
Yeah. So when I think of AI, think of like Russian dolls, right? Like Russian nested dolls. AI is the big category where it's really about, performing the cognitive functions that a human mind could. So AI at its like rawest form is, can I get a machine to perceive, reason, learn, interact with an environment, and most importantly, problem solve like a human, but not the timeliness of a human to solve a problem. We're talking millions of attempts to solve a problem at a millisecond. That's AI. Now, machine learning is a subset of AI, which is just one of the tools on training a computer using a variety of different methods. Like one of the most popular forms of machine learning is something called supervised learning. So to give you an example, like with Probility AI, say you have a really important business question. You're the owner or you're the general manager of, say, the Green Bay Packers, which is a professional National Football League team here in the States. And you might ask a question like, I want to know before I sign this player, how many games do you think they're going to play in their career? Something very specific. So I would say I'm going to use machine learning. I'm going to look at all the players that have played in the NFL, say, for the last 20 years. And I know, because their careers have ended, how many games each player played in their career. So what I'll do is I'll then look at all the other fields, such as the player's height, their weight, how fast could they run a mile, what was their combine score, how many touchdowns, you name it. There's a metric for it that's measured, and we call these features or fields. And so say there's like 400 of them I have in a database. And then what I do is I tell the computer, I am going to hide how many career games each player played, and I'm going to have you look at all the other fields, and then you're going to go and try and come up with a model and make a guess. And then slowly I'll uncover the answer and say, was I right or was I wrong? If I was wrong, I cover it up again, I adjust the model, and a computer can do that guessing game, because that's really what it's doing. It's looking at all the relationships that are possible. It can do millions of calculations a second until you get to a level of confidence to say, you know what, this is a pretty good model. It works for everyone. So that's the way I would, really view machine learning. It's a tool. It's a subset of this broader category of AI.
Wow. Now, since you said that, Quinton, there is a very interesting article, an HBR article, right? And you just mentioned about the NFL. The NFL is like worth billions of dollars, and where it involves Super Bowl, it's very hard to get a Super Bowl ticket as well. So, how can your company help NFL to make better decisions? Because players are prone to injuries. Sometimes you might expect someone to be there for a particular season, but that person might not be available for that season. Could you just enlighten us?
Yeah, there's many ways using AI can help any pro sports teams, but keeping it specific to the NFL. Let's talk. Okay, so what is the goal of every NFL team? Hopefully, if they have good ownership, the goal is we want to win the Lombardi Trophy, which is the Super Bowl championship trophy every year. And so our philosophy is really simple. There's three foundational blocks we look at when helping teams. The first is teams show up with what we call is experiential intuition. So think of the thousands of years of experience from the scouts, the GM, the owner, all of the football personnel, all the behind the scenes medical staff. This is the collection of coaching decisions, gut instinct. And what's great about experiential intuition is you can actually measure it. You can go back in time and say, did the team win? Did the team lose? Did a player get hurt? Did a player not get hurt? How many touchdowns? How many yards? That is the foundational block, which even with AI doesn't change. At the end of the day, the human will always make the decision. The other point about experiential intuition, which is the first of three foundational blocks, is this is the idea of biases. Within that block, there's a lot of good biases. For example, you might have a scout who says, you know what, I scout offensive linemen. I'm really good at picking centers, and I think I'm really good at, picking an offensive lineman or an outside linebacker. But it turns out when you actually look at the data, they are really good at picking centers, but they're terrible at picking the other position. So as a coach, you can start to say, okay, let's look at some good biases, which we'd want to reinforce, and get rid of bad biases. So the team comes to the table with that. The second thing, which a lot of teams have, and you've probably heard this yourself, is this idea of what we call descriptive analytics or exploratory analytics. So this is what you see like on all the gambling sites. This is what you see on ESPN.com or any college football site of, here's the matchup today. Here's the over under. Here's how many points. And it's all the statistics, and teams use them in two ways. One, they use them to manage in-game performance. And then the other way they use it is for things like, okay, I want to be able to figure out what salary we should pay a player. What's the current market value? So a lot of teams do that. Now where Probility comes in is we have a database of all the public available information on the NFL going back 20 years. It took us over 2 years to pull together. So we have access to all the descriptive statistics, maybe not all the private data like heart rate monitor data, or a lot of you've heard of about Amazon, next gen stats in football, like separation time or total distance run in a game. Those are all new stats, which are very interesting, but few and far in between. Where probability comes in is this third bucket we call predictive analytics. So you could tell me going, well, Quinton, of course, teams are always making predictions and guesses. You can't claim to invent predictive analytics. Well, I'm not claiming to invent predictive analytics. What I'm offering up that is different is teams traditionally will say, I want to project this draft pick is going to be the next Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers. And they're trying to make an informed guess based on what? Their experiential intuition or looking at a stat book from the last 20 years. Where we come in with AI, as I was explaining earlier, is I could take 400 features of that player and every player that's played over 20 years, and I can start to do very, very advanced, not linear regression models, but being able to tailor a prediction to say this player had a torn ACL when he was 24 years old. He missed 6 games when he was 28 years old, and he got traded from this town to this town where they play in colder weather. And now I can start making a prediction that's individually tailored to that player. Adding those 3 up is how you get to a superior outcome. So with that in mind, as I'm kind of alluding to a little bit, imagine having the ability, and you're the GM going, I need to trade a player because I need this new capability on my team. I could use a tool provided by Probility and say, put this player on every roster in the NFL and then pay them different amounts. And now with high degrees of accuracy for your audience that understands statistics, talking about R squared, which is really the square root distance from the truth. So if I made a prediction of 300 games and a guy played 300 games in his career, I'd say R squared of 1. It's perfect, right? So when I'm talking about making predictions, we're talking 80 to 90% accurate, where an NFL football player that's going to get traded, I could say, I know with 90% confidence this player is going to play 150 games in their career. Now, what would a GM do with that information? They could use it to say, cool, this player is undervalued by an opponent. I can go in and get this player for cheaper, creating an arbitrage situation, get them on my roster. Or, not to say people do this, you could have a very Machiavellian GM and say, I've got a player on my team I want to get rid of, and I'm going to make sure I send him to a team where his future is worse than it was playing for me. So this really starts opening up ethical questions too, even in the world of pro sports, of when you have that knowledge and you're the owner or the GM, are you going to tell a player that you know he's got a 90% chance of only playing 1 more year? Or if you're me, would you go to that player's agent or that player and say, hey man, your career's not going to last much longer, but it turns out if we can get you to lose 5 pounds, I can make your career last longer. So there could be a point in the very near future where you could see player agents, agencies, players, GMs, and executives actually forming what I would call like a symbiotic relationship to say, let's use AI to benefit both parties. But I think for the foreseeable future, you're going to see asymmetrical warfare in pro sports where managers and GMs are going to keep the data private in order to create these arbitrage situations to get the best out of their teams and their rosters. I know that was a lot of information for you, but I get very excited about the topic. So happy to elaborate on any of that, or keep pressing on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I would love a well-emphasized explanation like how you did it, man. That's pretty awesome. Now, apart from this NFL project, right? Okay, just before I go there, like Toby, like, so you all have a database, right? And you all can predict these players, like who were injured. And let's say you are going to predict about another player, you can predict his future for the next season.
You can do 2 things. So one of the things for all the data scientists listening into this, I'm sure they'll appreciate, is I spend 95% of my time doing data engineering. So if you want a fun job, and this is going to be a very profitable job for people in the future, is something like taking and cleaning names and cleaning birthdays and cleaning data, because most of the big companies around the world, they're all connected by disparate databases. And so right now, these new startup companies and newer retail, newer teams, just recent companies like Tesla is well positioned to where they built their architecture for their business to really leverage tech like AI. Big traditional retailers, and even Amazon to a certain extent, they're going to have a tougher time getting everything together. In there. I just want to kind of send a shout out to all the data scientists out there that they know the struggle is real when it comes to assembling the database before you can even do the AI. and do all that fun prediction stuff, which is where all the juice is.
Yeah, wow. Based on that, I'm learning Python programming. So
Yeah.
one day it might be useful as well in my job. So as the world is keeping on evolving, I need to evolve too.
Everyone should learn Python. So if you want to survive in the next, call it AI economy, Python is going to be one of the foundational skills for interacting with databases. And if you want to get really good at data engineering, go learn the software language Go. That'd be my 2 points of advice for folks that are interested in this field.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Quinton. So apart from NFL projects, what does Probability AI do?
Sure. So I can tell you, not only from the NFL side where we're predicting player careers as well as looking at ideas. So next season is very helpful for things like injury flagging, saying what's the probability, not to be confused with probability, we get that a lot, on is there like a warning sign? So to give you an example for NFL briefly, what's the chance a player is going to get an injury that turns into a nagging injury that's going to put them on the IR list, the injured reserve list? Or we also calculate what's the chance they're going to go right to IR, maybe miss a big chunk of the season. And then similarly for career, that's where you talk a lot with the GM or the person who's negotiating contracts, where is it better to sign this player for 3 years or 4 years? Can I extend this player's career by playing them less or changing some of those features? So in addition to NFL, which took us almost about 2 years to get off the ground, I'm a hockey player by background. So I played high level hockey here in the US for our U.S. national team, as well as Division I collegiate hockey. And I do active scouting with our national body, as well as with college and amateur teams. So we recently released about 2 months ago, our first NHL database. And the NHL, even though it's another pro sport, what's fascinating about AI is some things are similar to the NFL, but some things are radically different. So for NHL teams, we predict all sorts of stuff like how many points is a player going to get next year? How many penalties are they going to draw? And then the same statistics for career length, especially around what we call the ARC, availability, reliability, and capability. You want to know, is your player going to be available? Can they reliably do their job? And are they capable of doing their job? So that's really the foundation of what we call our ARC database. And that is where all of our predictions come from. But beyond NHL and NFL, which are just our first entries into pro sports, I can tell you I turn down more work than I take.
Wow.
Recently, we had folks, I won't call them out by company name to protect their innocence, but we had lawyers, lots of lawyers say, what if you could do predictive billing for new associates? I'm like, sounds not exciting to me, but yes, you could use AI for that. We get a lot of requests from retail. So retail is an interesting area depending on the area. As we were kind of chatting in our pre-chat a little bit, I'm also the founder of several other AI companies in ag tech, as well as some AI companies in neuroscience. So there's lots of applications for this. And I like to pick on lawyers because I have to employ them as well. So they kind of advise me that I got to separate my business to stay out of liability trouble. But there's all sorts of new ideas. Every day we get hit with something new that I'm never too surprised. At least there's not a day I haven't woken up yet where someone has a new use for AI. And my answer is, okay, yeah, like here would be a good process for your listeners. If somebody wants to get involved in AI or has an AI question, you would start with a business question. One of the big misconceptions here is people, and you've probably heard this yourself in your professional career, going, hey, Watson, I've got a pile of data. There must be gold in that. How about you smart data guys, go look at this pile of data and turn it into a product we can monetize. If somebody does that, you should run the other way. That's not the proper way to think about these problems. What you really want to do is ask a burning important business question. Is there some new opportunity you wish you could go after? Is there some division that's just not making enough money? You want to find something that, okay, I want to go solve this. And as I used the example earlier in the NFL, how I got involved in this was because one of the teams here in the States had a player they signed who is an injury risk, who they thought might have been injury risk. And they ended up spending 2 years of salary and the player never got to play in a game. And so they came to us saying, we never want to be in this situation again. Is there a way using data you could predict if this guy is going to play for us next year, or how many games is he going to play for us is a better question. So I would tell somebody who asked that question, great question. So let's start with A, what data do you have currently? Let's look at that. understand what beliefs you have as an organization. B, is there other data in your organization that you think would be helpful, but you're not networking with it? Maybe I need finance data, or I need ticket sales data about jersey sales about this player if we cut him. Talk about that. And then C, which is the most important part of the data, is do we need to gather new data? Do we have to come up with a new way? And then adding those three together, then you go through the process of model building, saying, can we build a model to ask and answer that fundamental question?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and when we talk about neuroscience, AI will play a big role in neuroscience, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest reasons I tell folks, and I say this in jest, is the only way to get really good at neuroscience is to do a lot of brain surgery. And that's not a very good future for aspiring surgeons, because the last thing we want to do is have to deal with more neurosurgery and doing more tests, more experiments. So the way around that is actually getting into, could you make a model of the human brain? And then could you model different tumors? Could you overlay those two models on each other? And now, a matter of minutes, start generating millions of different types of brain scans with different tumors. And then you could, hopefully, even in third world countries, be able to train neurosurgeons using an AI assisted tool and be able to bring that capability to parts of the world where normally you would have to go to a first world country to get that kind of medical help. So there's a lot of, I think, big aspirational ideas we've been approached to help with, and we're happy to do that and happy to get those ideas off the ground.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah. So basically, like, let's say, like, I was reading some, what's it? I can't remember. Maybe the Guardian. I was not sure whether it's a BBC. There was somebody, if I'm not mistaken, from Netherlands. He had a severe injury, and his spine was affected. Later, with the help of AI and Bluetooth, he was using equipment, and step by step, slowly, he could walk. But many told he cannot walk, but he was walking.
Yeah,
So
with the tech, and what's amazing with the tech, and again, coming back to ethics, if there's another takeaway for your audience, is when people talk about AI and they're not talking about ethics at the same time, that's when you should be worried, because there is an ethical component here as well. So even in things like neurosurgery, okay, if we were going to use AI assisted neurosurgery and a doctor told you this is what we're going to do on one of your loved ones, you would want to know, well, how accurate is this AI program? 99.9 may not be good enough for the lawyers and the people involved in a major hospital system, where they might want to see 99.9 and a whole lot of other nines. And so that's why there's a careful balance of, depending on the application of AI, you're going to have different levels of accuracy, different levels of efficacy. So when I talk about pro sports or anything in particular, but let's use pro sports since it's relevant to probability, you have to always ask yourself, if we weren't using AI, well, how did we do this before? There's always a million different ways to skin a cat, and all of those things cost different amounts of money. If you were to talk to any NFL GM or owner, they'd say, well, I really trust Bob. Bob's been scouting football for 60 years. Well, Bob can't scout for another 60. Could we digitize Bob? What's Bob cost? How good is Bob? And what you find out, and this is really tough, this is part ego here too, that I would love to touch on, is if you were to look at an NFL GM or executive who's in the Hall of Fame, well respected in the public media, and you ask them behind closed doors, say, how good of a decision maker are you when it comes to identifying players, signing players for the right value, and putting the right players on your roster? They would tell you, if they're like 62% accurate, they're going to make the NFL Hall of Fame. So now, as a data scientist, I go, well, if I got a model that's 64% accurate or 70% accurate that still shows the right trend for a given question, that's awesome. You can use that as part of the tool set to help any NFL team, help any pro team. So there is a human element here at the end of the day, where humans, we all think we're infallible. We make great decisions. And AI now enables us to make millions of predictions, millions of decisions with no risk, and then add that into our gut intuition, or add that in to some of our exploratory and descriptive statistics, with that goal of just incrementally making a slightly better decision, especially in pro sports. An incremental decision of 0.1% better, spending 100 grand less than my opponent is, could allow me to sign a better player at the trade deadline, could allow me to have a roster that lasts an extra 5 games or has enough energy to get through the playoffs. And it really is a game of inches in pro sports. So we think we can bring that competitive edge to any team and to any sport.
Wow. Wow. Pretty insightful. So, Quentin, now we see these days like, how can we say? There are some sources saying AI has the potential to hit the trillion-dollar industry by 2030, right? So, what are the challenges you see in AI?
Well, I think one of the big things right now, like any nascent injury, industry, go back like 20 years. I'm not going to date myself here too much, but look at the early days of like AOL and the internet, where it's wild, wild.
Mm,
West. You got, this firm popping up, this firm popping up, and originally in AI, everyone was talking about, oh, there's C3 AI, they're doing so much innovative things, and then all of a sudden ChatGPT comes out. It's like, wow, look at ChatGPT, and no one's talking about C3 AI. So to make this one, I agree with you that it is going to exceed and be a $1 trillion industry. Now, the question is, how is that industry going to be fed? And like anything, it's still going to be fed by people. So right now,
mm,
there's going to be people that have been involved in data scientists or came out of these legacy IT booms from the dot-com era that are
mm,
skilled in these areas that are kind of going to be our graybeards for the next 5 to 10 years to guide us. Then there's going to be new opportunity from university as well as trade school to learn something, as I mentioned, like learn a language, learn Python, learn R, learn Go. And you're going to have many, many new careers coming out of this. You'll have data scientists that are going
mm,
to come up with new models, new features. You're going to have data engineers that are actually looking at how do you build a database, how do you organize information, and there's always going to be a need for the visionaries, or what I call the tech managers. These are the people that are going to be able to communicate what is the problem and here's what the answer should look like. So as I have very young kids, I'll say under the age of 9, and I'm encouraging my oldest daughter to be, hey, you should start looking at math. You should start looking at comp sci. One of our other co-founders, Dr. Toby Velty,
mm.
his daughter is currently studying neuroscience, just
Wow.
like he did, but he's also a technologist. So I think you're going to start seeing these new careers and mix of, again, the human ethics, neuroscience, computing, engineering. You're going to see this convergence that's all going to feed into AI. And for the short term being, it's going to be, can I use AI systems effectively? I'm sure you've seen the memes going, my new job is I just type questions into ChatGPT and get answers back. But there's more of an art to it than just doing that. On being able to get the response you need to get out of a system like ChatGPT or Midjourney is another favorite one that I love to dabble in and create AI art. Again, ethics with AI art and things of that nature, and copyrights and all sorts of really interesting things. But then I think after that, people are going to start coming up with new AI models and different ways to fuse one AI model into another to generate a wholly unique output. And we'll start doing what humans do well, is we start to systems integrate, not only across disciplines, as I mentioned before, but we'll start doing cross-discipline AI modeling. And I'm very, excited, enthusiastic. I'm not a doom and gloomer about the AI future. For those of you that like Terminator, I don't think AI is turning into Skynet anytime soon. And people may ask, well, why is that? I think it's very simple. It's because humans program AI. We put our own biases into it. So we could
Yeah,
easily correct a bad bias with a good bias to change AI behavior. So I'm more worried about the humans and the way they program than I am about an AI system going rogue.
absolutely. And do you, Toby, sorry, Quinton, do you think um, AI will help in fraud detection, or how can it be avoided?
Yeah, so AI, I mean, lots of interesting applications for fraud. I can tell you one of these people that came up to us and asked us for some help in AI was it was going beyond just bank fraud, because most banks today on some level are using AI from, say, a chatbot to looking for fraudulent transactions. I can share with you one of the other businesses that I'm involved with. We do cannabis and AI for retail transactions. Cannabis is illegal in a lot of parts of the world.
Mm,
And states, we're kind of divided. We have medicinal states, we have full rec states, and we have illegal states. And one of the areas we've been using AI in is a traditional one, like churn, being able to predict when customers are going to come and go. But there's also fraud. So we were doing a lot of work in Puerto Rico and other territories of the US. And we were able to use AI to start looking at transactions across multiple dispensaries These are stores that sell cannabis products. And you could start seeing and tying individuals to doing over transactions where they're trying to beat the system. And when you start looking at how much they're purchasing, there's no way a human individual could be consuming that amount of cannabis. They must be selling it illegally. So what's cool about AI in this regards is there are ways within retail, within banking, and now within things like cannabis or alcohol, where you could start to identify black market behaviors. Which again, depending on what side of the law you are, you see this as very valuable, or you could see it very much as a deterrent for those people that want to commit kind of black market type crimes.
Wow, pretty insightful, Quinton. Very insightful. So based from your experience, I mean, you have a very interesting background, okay? And I'm sure you experienced many things in the past 2 decades. Is there anything you would like to tell our, as a final message to our viewers and listeners?
Yeah, one of the best things I can tell folks, given my unique background, just personally of being an athlete, being an engineer, working, doing public service, working private consulting, I've done international work. I would tell folks is you need to try everything at least once. Like if you have an idea for a business, you should try and be an entrepreneur at least once. Because one of the valuable things I find, most people tell me I'm crazy. I'm 44 years old, and people are like, "Oh, you have mortgage payment, you have kids, like." You're just going to quit your day job and you're going to go and be an entrepreneur? I'm like, yeah, why not? I feel like I'm being able to lean on my collective life experience that if I didn't do all these things from hockey coaching, working for 3-letter agencies, doing consulting, that I would not be in the best position that I am today to be talking to you and be able to create these businesses from scratch. So that one piece of advice I said to your audience is, if you're doing a job, if you're sweeping floors, or if you're working fast food, you can always be learning. In the evening, I taught myself a lot on how to code. I taught myself how to do data viz from Tableau, in addition to my formal studies and my day jobs, that there's always way to learn. And because of technology, things are essentially almost near a cost of zero. People can go on Udemy, you can go on other websites and enroll in classes, pay $10 and get 100 hours of awesome classwork and learning a new programming language. So I tell folks, especially with this digital economy, and I tell this to my kids, is try and pick up a new skill. Go do something, go for it, learn it. You'll always have it. You can always go back to it. Something else catches your eye, that's okay too. Go do that, but your collective experience will benefit you, especially as I'm getting older. I'm starting to really see the fruits of those labors that I've been putting in year over year. And even as we speak right now, I'm enrolled in many Udemy classes. I'm always working on improving my data viz, and I'm always looking to go back to school and, again, just learn from other people as well too. So don't quit learning. That's my advice to your audience. There's opportunity if you look for it.
Absolutely. So the best anti-aging medicine is lifelong learning.
Yes.
Wise words. Yeah. Wise words. Right. So Quinton, thank you very much for taking time and doing this podcast with us.
Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here. Best of success to you and the podcast in the future.
Thank you very much.